In Singapore, we eat what we want, when we want, and we want it now. But as the world stands at the brink of a possible food crisis, this culinary paradise must take greater measures to fortify its food supply. What does it take to keep a city of 5.6 million fed?
Under normal times, most Singapore households are really not that concerned with food security.
A lot of us Singaporeans, we feel that there's no problem with food because we easily are able to get food at affordable prices.
Food security is the matter of national survival and it's also an existential issue for us.
We're a tiny island, 55 years old, but yet we don't seem to have a problem with food at all. And you have to remember that we actually import more than 90% of everything that we consume on this little island.
We are very diversified in terms of food sources. Sometimes we just take it for granted that food will come our way because we are a trading and shipping hub. But actually, that's because we have, very purposefully gone out to diversify our sources and to open up new markets for us.
Firstly, you need to get an import license from SFA before you can import, and it's not one license meets all, right? It's different licenses for different types of food. That's just to keep the security and the food safety aspects. For someone like us, where we have our own warehouse, the container actually reaches our warehouse. We have our own guys, we cut the seal. Once the seal is cut, our guys will need to do a quality check of all the products in the container as well. Sometimes the product comes like whether is it toppled down because it's not stacked properly, or maybe there's a hole in the container as well. There can be rainwater coming in. The whole container is basically wasted.
Under normal times, most Singapore households are really not that concerned with food security. There could be temporary shortages, as we saw, but eventually the shelves will be refilled. Supply chains have again been refreshed, been renewed, because governments have taken measures to deal with that.
Oriental Veggie is a wholesale distributor and retailer of vegetables. So what we do is we get vegetables from local farms and different farms from Malaysia as well to distribute and even process some of these vegetables to our local F&B outlets and even to wet markets. Our customers are primarily F&B outlets, hotels, resorts. Before the pandemic, a big client can actually spend up to 150 grand a month on our vegetables. It's almost 2 a.m. now. We just received a big shipment. We have many orders to fulfill. The first stop is to actually look at the DO and see what's the order. Of course, the different customers will have different requirements, right? So we have to get the order right. All right. That's a nice one. Prior to pandemic, we work around the clock to deliver more than 20 tons a day. But right now, the volume has more than halved. Less people are eating out. There's less tourism in Singapore as well. So all this actually affected the F&B businesses and also affected us as a supply chain.
In the COVID-19 situation, we've seen that globally, the food supply chain has been disrupted all over. Agricultural workers have been unable to work in the fields, transport has been disrupted, the containers have been stuck in certain ports. Some countries even banned the export of their food produce in order to cater their domestic needs. If we're overly reliant on overseas food supply, this overseas food supply may not be able to come into Singapore in certain situations.
Okay, I'm fulfilling one of the orders, which is kangkong. Kangkong is actually one of the more popular leafy greens that Singaporeans love to eat. On average, one weekday, right, we supply about 600 kilograms of leafy greens. And on weekends, it can go more than 1,000. 0.02. Our biggest enemy is actually our harsh environment in Singapore. We have high humidity, high heat. Vegetables can get damaged or spoiled quite easily. That's why we have refrigerated trucks to deliver our products to relevant outlets. And our warehouse air conditioning is on 24 hours a day. The average lifespan of a vegetable varies. For leafy greens, on average, they only last less than 2 days. This is our local Thai sim. Right, we actually work with 2 local farms, get the leafy greens from them, and they may cost a little bit more, but they are far superior in quality and taste. Hey Siva, help me take one extra box of old ginger. Can put over there. Singaporeans are getting more health conscious, so after a while they can tell the difference between not so good vegetables and of course better vegetables out there.
Singapore became a developed country not too long ago. So we're still evolving our habits, our cultural preferences here in Singapore. Singaporeans as consumers are still very price sensitive, especially amongst the heartlanders, which is very different, of course, amongst the higher socioeconomic class. Then you can afford to be more choosy as to what you buy.
Okay, this is the processing room where we process about 12 tons of vegetables a day. Carrots, cabbage, chilies, you name it, we'll process it. You might be wondering, in this age of machines, why are there people cutting the vegetables by hand? The simple truth is that they actually look better being cut by hand. After they're finished cutting, they will actually vacuum pack the vegetables into little bags like this. Okay, what you're seeing here is just about 20% of the total orders that we have for tonight. Me and my team of 12 is going to work all night to fulfill the orders to deliver the F&Bs on time. We cannot afford any delays because this will affect our customers' businesses. As you know, F&B outlets, when they open, they need to serve the customer on time as well. And we actually deliver the products before they even open. Singaporeans, I think they do not realize that people are actually working around the clock to have the food delivered to them on time. Wet markets, F&B outlets, right, they open very early. So what happens before that? We are actually helping the supply chain as well. Most Singaporeans have not realized that there's a whole army of people working behind the scenes to actually deliver the food on time onto their table and have the whole country fed.
Wet markets cater for food that is fresh and imported very directly from the sources of production, whether they are from the same country or outside the same country.
这边是马来西亚菜和中国菜来的，这个是日本黄瓜在马来西亚种的，价钱1公斤3块。这个北京包菜，这个马来西亚和那个中国菜呢，价钱那个不稳定，每天起起落落。
Resilience is so important for us, and increasing our level of self-production is a policy way to increase our resilience to disruptors. Even if we succeed by 2030, we will still have to import 70% of our food, which is why we still have to maintain our external sources. Make sure that our supply chains remain intact, and make sure that we in fact have agreements with governments where they will not interrupt our supply chains. Supermarkets are a modern phenomenon, and they are a response to the modern ways of growing food, modern supply chains, cold chain management, all the technology part of that. But also because consumers have changed their habits. Consumers nowadays want convenience. They want to go to a place where they can buy food, have a variety of food, know how much they're getting, what the price is.
Generally for seafood, because mainly are imported. So what happens is that there is a lot of other interim costs that are not known to consumers. They may have gone through middlemen to consolidate and before sending over to Singapore. And the different mode of transport would actually affect the prices as well.
From Prime's point of view, we realized that throughout the entire year of getting supplies from our local neighboring countries, there are always truncation in the supply. There are ups and downs. Having assessed all of that, we decided to sail off into the sea to do aquaculture. It is often overlooked when agricultural product arrives on the table or as an ingredient, or you purchase it from a retail outlet, that the amount of work and processes that goes in.
In the early part of 2000s, late in 1900s, we had a lot of what we call legacy farms that in general were still using old conventional technology. And there were what we call yield gaps. Differences between what potentially they could produce and what they actually produce, right? So all these yield gaps can be narrowed with technology.
I wanted to experience what it's like to be working on the kelong, and then because we always buy fish from a market, but we don't know where our fishes come from. I learned that rearing fishes is so much harder than you just catch it wild from the sea. Peru, you take 3 bags of feed to feed the bunlang, and then Korea, you take 2 bags to feed the angkui. The most labor-intensive job would be feeding fish. Every time we have to stand at net cages for about 10 to 15 minutes feeding, and then a packet of feed is about 20 to 25 kilos. If we're doing this traditional feeding method, we just try to spread the feed as wide as possible so that all the fishes can eat. So in this net, currently we have about 10,000 fingerlings here.
Traditional legacy farming is hard work. With technology, with mechanization, we've been able to reduce the drudgery. So technology has a big role to convince farmers to continue farming and also to convince the next generation of farmers to go back into farming.
We are trying to overcome this challenge by getting in our automated feeder. Currently on our farm, we have one automated feeder that we are doing on trout. It allows us to actually feed our fishes more evenly, and then you have a lesser chance of snatching feed. For traditional net washing methods, we have to use generator to operate the high pressure water hose. We brought in 3 underwater net washing machines. It actually allows us to wash the nets underwater without having to raise the nets.
In China, we're seeing a young generation now come back to farm using modern technology, drones, sensors, modern machinery. The government, as a policy matter, wants Singapore to become a very digital society. And this has impacted agriculture in a big way.
So normally on our typical harvesting day, our orders would come in at 12 p.m. in the afternoon. Then at 1 p.m. we'll start making crushed ice. Because we're only harvesting portion of the fishes, and if we don't want to alarm the other fishes, so to reduce stress for the other fishes, we'll do separation by only separating what we need. On weekdays, we harvest about 300 to 400 kilos a day. And then on weekends, we would harvest about 800 to 1,000 kilos a day.
We still have not met our internal targets. In some years, we do. I don't think it's every year that happens. Fish, definitely not. The 15% target, I think we're lucky if we get up to 10%. It varies from 7 to 10%.
% of our fish production goes to local market. We were still a little bit on the crossroad in terms of how to make it so affordable. I think the pandemic became almost a prescience in the sense that we are doing this when globalization is under a lot of scrutiny. And local self-subsistence is actually the very important process for food security right now.
Singaporeans just love to eat seafood. The love for seafood, right, is really very demanding. So what happens when the shipments comes through? Seafood, after clearance from the airport, they will land into my facilities here. The farming team will unbox the seafood and ensure that they go into good facilities management. Facilities plays a very important part in keeping the live seafood alive, and fresh and quality. Before we decide what to import, we actually picked up findings or stats from various channels. Of course, we talk to restaurants. Of course, we evaluate what people comes in to buy at retail. What are people actually buying out there?
Because of COVID, we are focusing even more on food diversification. In that process of diversifying our food, we urge Singaporeans to give new foods from new countries a try and have that resilience. We need to be prepared that food may come from different countries or they may come with slightly different tastes.
This is our retail space. Here we actually have all the freshest seafood that we picked up daily from Senoko Port. These are the top 3 well-loved fresh prawns that's preferred by most of the Singaporeans. Popular prawns like tiger prawns, we can sell out to customers like on a week more than 1 ton. Usually when a customer comes into the retail, they see the fish, it's not clean and gutted yet. So the professional team inside here are the people that helps to do the clean and gutted service. One of the biggest challenges of my job is that when purchasing team tell me that, hey, the flight cancelled on you for this shipment, people get disappointed because they do not get the seafood that they wanted. So usually when we actually bring in import seafood, it's not like, ding, do they come in tomorrow, the flight in. We plan it like 1 week ahead. So during this 1 week, it is actually crucial because flight get cancelled very easily during this COVID or pandemic period.
We do have short-term fluctuation in prices, or you just find that your favorite food type is not available. So Singaporeans should never take our food sources for granted and should be mentally prepared for disruptions.
It's largely affected by demand and supply. Interestingly, I would say China is the biggest leader in terms of purchasing, in terms of the demand. So whenever China wants to buy a particular meat, we're all affected. Containers that import meat usually have a freezer inside. They have to manage the temperature between -18 to -20. So the container arrives at the respective cold rooms, warehouses, or third-party logistics. Then from there, the distribution happens to the distributors, from us to the distributors, and distributors to the food services, and then ultimately to the end consumers. This is the processing area. The temperature is controlled at about 12 to 16 degrees. Over here is our temperature control. We segregated them into different processing rooms based on poultry, beef, mutton, and fish, so to prevent any cross-contamination. So when the meat comes in, we'll actually thaw it overnight to get to the right temperature. Then we'll cut it. After we're done, we'll bring it out for delivery or back to the cold room. On a really busy day, we can actually cut up to 2,000 kgs of meat a day. When frozen raw meats are usually imported, they come in a bulk pack. And they come in a whole slab of meat. They don't come in like your usual New York strip cuts, So we call them like raw materials, the base materials, to be served to the end consumer. So the meat usually go through a processing plant where they will do further processing into slicing, cubing, even cutting into specific shapes that you want. Cold rooms play a very important part in this industry. These cold rooms are in strategic locations in Singapore, at the far west, or the centralized area, or the far east. So we're located in a food industrial area. A cold room is where we keep all our frozen meats. It can be your mutton, chicken, lamb, even our ready-to-eat items as well. We are controlled at a temperature of -18 to -20. And you can feel that it's really freezing cold. Yeah.
Cold rooms, slaughterhouses, meat houses have been shut because of transmission. So we must be prepared for disruption of food supply. And it gives us even greater resolve to make sure that we have a diversified food strategy.
But because of this COVID, a lot of countries are affected. They have to focus on their domestic markets to cater to their domestic markets. So there's a lot of shortages in terms of meat.
We throw away more than 30% of everything that we import. 30% of food that's being dumped is equivalent to billions of dollars that you are incinerating every single year. When people talk about food waste in Singapore, you always talk about consumer waste or waste at household levels. But a lot of people do not see the waste that actually happens behind the scenes.
Hi everyone, welcome to Food Bank. My name is Sophia. I'll be with you guys today for your volunteer session. Just to give you guys a little bit of background information about Food Bank. Food Bank is really a logistics charity here in Singapore.
What we do is we're kind of like a ninja behind the scenes where we collect excess food from the supply chain. And the food actually goes to in excess of about 150,000 people on the ground. Singapore's a free port. There's no import taxes levied on food. Anybody that has money can actually import any food into Singapore as long as it's approved. There's no import taxes levied on food. A lot of times, these products end up in the dumpsters because they import too much without knowing whether these will sell or not. We are really seeing right now, there's so many types of snacks because everybody feels that it's a profitable business to get into. So a lot of people actually import all these nice snacks from all around the world, thinking that it will fit the Singaporeans' taste buds. But actually, sometimes, while it looks nice and it does well in other countries, it really does not do well in Singapore. So once that happens, there's a lot of competition and it becomes a price war. So definitely it ends up in a dumpster somewhere as well. So my question would be, do you think that we can actually better control this so that all of us can better use our resources? Maybe when times are good, we don't need to ask that question. So that's why the food banks all around the world are the pseudo-heroes in helping to pick up all the logistics tab for this pro bono redistribution.
Let's head on over here. And finally, the last item here, our 5 kg white rice. So that's our warehouse. Do you guys have any questions?
I see a lot of rice here. Do you all receive enough rice donations to help everyone?
Actually, no, because rice, particularly white rice in this size, is the most commonly requested size of rice. And so this can really only fulfill the request of about 20 beneficiaries. So this is actually not a lot in compared to what we've had pre-COVID and when our stocks are a lot more full.
For the food bank's mission, we are here to put ourselves out of business by 2025. And our target is by 2025, everyone should have a way of feeding themselves.
this is our in-house garden. So we have a lot of different variety of plants around. We have those edible plants like herbs, dog fennel, sweet potato leaves, some of the garnishes we also have, those edible flowers, marigold. The most important is we don't have to worry about stock problem. We can see the product itself and we know how it is grown because we are the one that is here and really take care of it. Most of our local produce, we liaise with the local farms. That's why for us, we have a lot of small suppliers. For using of local products, sometimes the things is a little bit on the pricey side. Especially those that we try to get is really organic. When the customer comes in, right, we will show them our menu, then we will introduce them to what we are about. Then even on the menu itself, there's the introduction for the farm that we are working with, so that they understand exactly where the product comes from. For customers, if they know exactly where the things come from, right, they feel more trustworthy. They will trust what they are eating more. During the pandemic, we didn't have issues with the local produce, but some of the imported ingredients, we do face a lot of shortages. Sometimes when we know there's new farm opening, we will look for them. And sometimes when they know about us, they will come to us and give us samples. For local produce, it will always remain as the key ingredient that we are looking for.
The average Singaporean doesn't understand just the sheer amount of food waste that a typical restaurant or hotel would generate, just the amount of trays and bins that are filled with waste. When I first learned about the food waste problem, well, firstly, I was utterly shocked. In my opinion, prevention is far more important than redistribution and recycling. And given that there were almost no solutions in the prevention space, I saw an opportunity and started Lumethics. We deploy a smart food waste tracker in kitchens to help executive chefs understand exactly what they're throwing away. Everything from inventory that has gone bad to waste from the production kitchen and also leftovers from the buffet line. When I first started speaking to chefs who run hotel restaurants, buffet restaurants, I realized that the main challenge that they face and the reason why they find it so hard to effectively reduce their food waste is because they often lack visibility of their food waste situation.
We set a charter out, our sustainable healthy food waste commitment to a food waste reduction of 50% by 2025. We have over 150 million to 200 million meals a year through our hotels. Singapore itself, we have 26 hotels, over 50 restaurants, and serving 20,000 meals a day. So it's our responsibility as a company to actually look at food waste. It's working with artificial intelligence, it's working with technology companies that helps us ultimately identify areas and what we need to focus on, how to reduce it.
Users would simply go up to the bin and toss away their food waste like they normally would. And all they need to do is just at a touch of a button, our device will then automatically capture its weight and also an image of what has been thrown away, and we use AI to identify that. Our AI is able to identify anything from an individual ingredient to a combination of ingredients, and we're able to train our AI to identify that as a dish.
So now the menu is completed, or we still need to go through the rest of the menu with the descriptions?
Tomorrow morning, I send
Tomorrow morning we're going to go through the rest of it?
I will do it with her.
Okay. There's certain things that you would put on a menu, and you might think that this is a menu item that everyone wants to eat, but actually your data says something completely different. Go back and look at the data against the guests that were actually in-house or what groups we had within the hotel, and you can make decisions for the future and say, next time we have that particular group or nationality within the complex staying in the hotel, we won't put that product out on the buffet, we'll change it and we'll do a different menu ingredient. So now we're inside Sky's restaurant's kitchen. What we basically do is we prep the vegetables or the meat or the fish individually, each individual element of the dishes. So like, for example, here we prep the chicory or the Belgian endive. And then basically what we're going to do is we'll just put it into the tracker itself. And through working with Raina's team, they'll have actually taken an image of this before. So when we actually place it in here, it will take a photograph, and then it will give us a weight afterwards. So you do it ingredient by ingredient. So when this bin is full, then we just do our normal process where we actually will dispose of it, and then we'll actually get a report from the team on how much waste we've actually done in this particular week on all the different ingredients, from the meat, the fish, the vegetables, all the way through. So we can actually go back and look at the costs that we have and the recipes that we have and see how much product that we're using and how much product that we're actually wasting.
We're probably looking at a 10 to 15% saving looking at just our products and food waste by buying smarter products, by buying products that are less perishable, by buying products that are closer to us, so that the expense of shipping in international products into Singapore is reduced.
Basically food that are made for human consumption or grown or harvested like your vegetables and fruits, right? And it's unsold and unused. What we do is we reincarnate surplus ingredients into new product. It just so happens that our market entry is beverages, and it just so happens that the very first beverage that we brought into the market commercially was beer. And it was through research that I found out that in Singapore there was a lot of unsold and unused bread. For an online grocer, if the bread is within like the last 3 days of its consumed by date, they will either discard it or they just give it to charity. These are basically bread that they were unable to sell or use on that day itself. So it's freshly made, only a day or two old. We are collecting about 45 kg of our bread. So Redmart is actually one of our main surplus ingredients partner. So yeah, let's go and collect some bread. We're just cutting the bread into smaller pieces. The reason being is that if we just throw in the whole bread into the mash, we'll get something called the stuck mash. It's not very good because then when we are trying to filter the beer, right, it will get stuck. So, you know, having it in like the proper size is necessary. How many more we need? 25. Yeah, so 12 each. Worldwide, there were 1.3 billion tons of food wastage, and that's a very ridiculous amount. So that was when I thought, why not start a brewing company that focuses around sustainability. I was quite shameless at the start, to be very honest. So I was just calling everybody I can, sending out emails. And I think I reached up to like maybe 20 plus different bakeries before I got my first yes. And it is true that a lot of locals are not the most receptive when it comes to wastage or, you know, finding an alternative to your wastage, right? It is so much easier to just throw it away. When we started out, right, it was quite early at the point of time. There were people who were approaching us, so like you use food waste. So that was when we realized that we have had to change the marketing and the way we structure our sentences quite a bit since then, because we then found out that food waste and food loss is very different.
Generally, there's not much focus on food loss in Singapore at the moment, but it's definitely growing. And we aim to be a pioneer to the general consumer to show them like how they could use everyday food loss products to upcycle it to a new product.
Singaporeans should never take our food sources for granted and should be mentally prepared for disruptions. Encouraging consumption of local produce is very much our priority. Draw awareness to our local produce and to encourage Singaporeans to buy local.
Food security is really not just about the science of it. It's also about consumer behavior. It's also about consumer values, concern about provenance, integrity. And these are all really, really great signs for the future for a country like Singapore.